Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my very real pleasure to introduce Professor Tanaka Hitoshi, a name that he may not know, but I've been very familiar with for a long time because I always wanted to know who is Mr. X. And I think we now know who Mr. X is, but he, to me, that negotiation for leading to an opening to North Korea, which unfortunately seems to have been lost, was a masterpiece of diplomacy. I myself am an ex-diplomat, and it's very rare that any country makes that sort of breakthrough, particularly Japan, which we never thought was very experienced in secret diplomacy. Anyway, it was thanks to, I'm sure he covers a much wider area than breakthroughs to North Korea. Now, as the chairman of the Institute of International Strategy, and I hope that we have the chance to hear his, but coming here at the time that he has come here, it was largely accidental that the North Korean situation would explode as it has. Is very timely, and I hope that he will tell us something about that as well. It's my pleasure to introduce him and to ask you to turn off your cell phones, and he will talk for 30 minutes, and then the floor will be open for questions. Hopefully, your time limit is 4 o'clock, is it? So we have a good hour for questioning, and I'm sure there will be many questions. Professor Tanaka, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gregory, for your kind introduction and also somewhat inflated compliment about me. To be very honest with you, I'm not entirely sure why I am here, because I left the government 12 years ago. I don't have much knowledge about what is taking place in Japan, nor in the Korean Peninsula. But as he kindly talked, 15 years ago, I negotiated with the interlocutors from North Korea, spent one whole year secretly negotiating with North Korea for the Japanese Prime Minister Junichiro Koizumi's trip to North Korea in 2002, September 17th, and the announcement of Pyongyang Declaration, in which we talked about a kind of roadmap for Japan's relations with North Korea, including how to resolve the question of nuclear development of North Korea. It very specifically talked about the multilateral solution to the North Korean nuclear development. But not only my experience in negotiating with North Korea during the beginning of 2001, indeed I had been following the issue for quite some time. I studied my observation of North Korean question from my directorship as the Northeast Asia director of the Japanese Foreign Ministry in 1988. We had the KAL incident there. I met with Kim Hyun-hee. That was my initial encounter with North Korean terrorists. And I witnessed the tension during the first North Korean nuclear crisis in 1994. I was the person who negotiated with America and Korea for the establishment of KEDO, which was intended to provide two reactors, light water reactors, to resolve the question of nuclear development of Korea. And I was the one who negotiated the first defense cooperation guidelines, which assumed Korean contingency. We sort of concluded defense cooperation guidelines in 1996. And I remember a time when I went in to talk with American interlocutors such as Kurt Campbell, and we sort of made a simulation of the Korean crisis, Korean contingency, and we sort of defined Japan's role to deal with North Korean crisis. And again, 2001, I started negotiation with North Korea for the sake of providing diplomatic solution to various pending issues, including nuclear, missile, abductees, sort of thing. To be very honest with you, although I left the Foreign Service 12 years ago, I still feel that diplomacy is to do with the diplomatic solution, diplomatic negotiations. We talked about, this government talked, almost all the government talk about pressures. Pressure is needed for the sake, not for the sake of pressure, for the sake of diplomatic solution. We need pressure. So let me discuss about my concerns I have in relation to the evolution of the situation on the Korean Peninsula. And I also would like to suggest my solution to the question of nuclear development of North Korea. First, I think that we should not discount the possibility of military confrontation on the Korean Peninsula. I will articulate the reasons why I say we should not discount the possibility of military confrontation on the peninsula. This is my sort of analysis based on my negotiations with two difficult countries, two meaning North Korea and the United States. I have spent very many years negotiating with the United States during the period when we had a huge trade surplus in the 1980s. I concluded 26 agreements with the United States. All those lawyers in the United States, they are so tough. They take all the time upper hands. If you don't do this, we shall punish you type sort of approach. So I had enough of it. North Korea, I spent, as I said, very many years. There are 5 reasons why I feel we should not discount the military confrontation. First, North Korea does not understand the true sort of approach on the part of the United States. North Korea feels that by developing nuclear weapon and ICBMs reachable to the mainland of the United States, in particular East Coast, would be the most important deterrence against the possible attack from the United States. This is dead wrong. Because if you remember things such as the Pearl Harbor, such as the 9/11, only when United States feel imminent threat to themselves, to the interest of United States national security, such as Pearl Harbor, such as 9/11, United States act decisively. North Korea doesn't understand this. Therefore, I think as North Korea develop their military capability, ICBMs reachable to the mainland with nuclear warhead, the risk will go up for the possible preemptive strike on the part of the United States. That's one of the reasons why I feel that military confrontation is a remote thing. It's not a remote thing. Second reason, as I said, United States is used to the approach which has been taken all over and over again as the only superpower of the world. But if you look at the history of Korean Peninsula, Korea is a nation which had been sort of imposed lots of pressures, aggression from Russia, from China, from Japan, and their sort of their mindset is their strong sort of fury against big powers. And U.S. approach is all the time, for the sake of justice, you must hear this and that. I think we need to understand the mindset of North Koreans. When I negotiated with North Koreans for the period of 1 year, I had a very, very strong feeling that given the fact that Japan sort of created lots of suffer on Korean people, I thought when I faced up with North Korean general, and my interlocutor was a general, I felt I should listen to them. I should first listen to what they wish to say. I just listened to their sort of cry of their mind for hours. He said that his grandmother had got Japanese names, and all sort of turmoils Korean people had to suffer during the colonization period. So, I mean, I think any diplomatic negotiations with friends, with enemies, with unknown entities such as North Korea, you must develop sense of trust. Without sense of trust, you cannot lead your negotiation to anywhere. So I'm afraid the United States does not understand this delicacy of the mindset of North Korean. Third reason why we cannot discount military confrontation is that this is very much linked to North Korean internal situation. Kim Jong, Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, and this is the third Kim. And again, Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, they have got charisma. And when I negotiated with North Koreans, North Korea was under Kim Jong-il. And my interlocutor used to say that how capable his master, Kim Jong-il, is, how brave he is, how sort of open-minded he is, that type of thing. Because what they need, I mean, this is, after all, the autocratic society. This is, I mean, the most tight control is provided to the daily lives of those people. But in order for them to consolidate their strength power, they need a kind of respect from people. And Kim Jong-un, young, inexperienced, and he is changing the very basic structure of North Korean governance system. In the period of Kim Jong-un, it was military first. Then now, political party first, but there are lots of the governance by terror. All those people are executed and all sorts of things. So Kim Jong-un needs to be appearing as a strong man. And this nuclear weapon, missile development, fighting with the United States is the very important tool for Kim Jong-un to rule the nation. Same thing may apply to the United States. I mean, I do not wish to talk about the Trump presidency, but this is irregular presidency. I mean, I do not know precisely what is going to take place in U.S. Political situation, but yet I think at least President Trump has lots of difficulty internally. The question of Russiagate, the question of budget, question of all the type of criticism from the traditional political institutions in the United States, how it affects external situations such as North Korean question. I have some worries. The fifth element, which is to do with the possible military confrontation, is a question of difference in terms of the system. The system in the United States, system in North Korea is entirely different. North Korean announcement, we all the time see all this women making the very sort of aggressive statement in relation to nuclear weapon, missiles. Basically, it's like the announcement by the military government here in Japan during the war. They fabricate. They sort of try to let others believe things which they want others to believe. So they make all the type of fabrication, exaggeration, and all sorts of things. So even during my negotiation, it was not very difficult to ask them to put up some statement. That's the way North Korea does. United States. And in particular, this administration, President Trump uses this tweet often, very shall I say, I'm not entirely sure how it is published. Well thought? Possibly not. Very sort of instant, impulsive. How it is interpreted in North Korea, there is a risk of being interpreted as it is. And North Korea doesn't understand how the check and balance system in democratic nation operates. So there is a risk here as well. So what I am talking about as it's just a possibility. We should not discount. We should not discard. Discard is the right word. Discard this possibility of military confrontation. Very unfortunate. We would like to avoid by all means. It is very, very clear in my mind that military confrontation on the peninsula will affect lives in Korea, in Japan, in a huge way. We need to find a diplomatic solution. And this is a priority subject. This is a very, very important issue for Japan, for the safety, security of Japan. What to do? First, we need to let North Koreans and also China convince that as time goes by, as North Koreans sort of further develop their military capability, in particular missile and nuclear capability, as I said, which may reach to Washington, New York, that will increase the risk that the U.S. act. North Korea and China in particular, needs to understand that. Point number one. Point number two, I still do think that there is a common around the nations in the neighborhood of North Korea, inclusive China, Russia, Korea, Japan, and United States. Common interest is denuclearization. Korea obviously has denuclearization interest. Japan has. China, I'm not entirely sure how China will think about full-fledged nuclear state of North Korea. I mean, North Korea is known for, clearly, North Korea develops their nuclear capability in order to be independent, not just from the United States, but from China as well. And I don't know how serious it could be in terms of national security of China, but yet there would be clearly the possibility of North Korea using their capability in their conduct of policies to China. And also there may be an argument, still there is a very strong argument coming up in South Korea for their own nuclear weapon as well. There may be a nuclear domino. So that should not be seen as a benefit to China. So China clearly has the common interest being denuclearization of Korean Peninsula. So I think we need to unite ourselves. The United States, South Korea, Japan, and China. Unite ourselves on what? As I said, there is the common interest in denuclearization, but at the same time, interest is this. You have to show to North Korea that you cannot survive with nuclear weapon, but you can survive without nuclear weapon. This is the kind of formulation we need to think about. And if you the Secretary of State Tillerson of the United States talked about 4 no's. 4 no's. How serious he meant, don't know, but yet I think it is suggestive. He talked about no regime change, no intention for regime change, no intention for collapse of the current government, no intention for promote the quick unification of Korean Peninsula. No, United States will not seek for an excuse for the U.S. military to move to the north. This may be the common, the point for departure for the negotiation. And again, we have already set a comprehensive agreement in September 2005, 6-party agreement, which talks about peace treaty, the normalization of the relations between United States, Korea, North Korea, Japan, North Korea, the economic cooperation, new type of confidence building measures, the energy cooperation, and the solution is there. So the question is how well we could convince them that you can survive without nuclear weapon, but you cannot survive with nuclear weapon. For that, very clearly, China must join us in agreeing to the very strict economic sanctions, including oil embargo to North Korea. And we must find out all the sort of loopholes in relation to the fund transfer to North Korea, banking system, and all sorts of things. Only when we demonstrated to North Korea that you cannot survive with nuclear weapon, we may be able to find the right way for negotiation with North Korea, not just for the negotiation's sake, but for leading to the real solution to the question of nuclear development of North Korea. This is, I don't know, reading Japanese newspaper, I am not entirely sure if diplomacy is at work today. I mean, I am very, very concerned. I mean, this type of escalation of tension, it may be necessary. We cannot be sort of, just be business as usual with North Koreans making all the type of violation of international law, making very, often threatening Japan and other countries. But yes, I am terribly worried. Even while you have and kind of envious relations with North Korea, there should be someone somewhere needs to be the line for communication. We need to let North Korea know what we think. It can be Americans, it can be Chinese, it can be South Koreans, it can be Japanese. The reason why I maintained dialogue with North Korea for the period of more than 1 year, I felt that this negotiation, this channel of communication would be important to avoid any misunderstanding or avoid any ad hoc accidental confrontation, all sorts of things. So during that time, I did not do just for the sake of Japanese national interest. We consulted with Americans, consulted with Koreans, and to communicate it to North Korea the way they should behave. I mean, they don't listen to us, but yet I think I am concerned. I may, as I said at the outset, since I don't know anything about the current sort of officialdom, therefore there may be negotiation going to take place behind the scene. The United States may be doing it, Japan may be doing it, South Korea may be doing it, China may be doing it. I sincerely hope so. So that's what I wanted to say. I am available to any questions you may have. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Well, the talk was so rich in quotes that scribblers will be busy for some time, but then I took points which really struck me, 3 of them. One, that North Korea and the United States were the 2 most difficult nations. Quote you on that, can we? Thank you. And you use the word is we should not discard the possibility of military confrontation.
Which we would like to avoid.
We'd like to avoid. And you try to, important that North Korea realizes that it can survive without nuclear weapons. Now, before we open for discussion, questions, well, I will ask a question. The North Korean answer to that statement is, look what happened to Libya, which was also given a similar promise. How do you answer that, Professor?
I think they have to weigh both. They must see the case of Iraq or case of any other country, Afghanistan as well, and case of Japan even. The point I'm making is Libya doesn't threaten the United States too much. What North Korea is doing is to develop capability which would threaten the mainland of the United States, which would increase the risk of US military measures. So that's all. North Korea needs to understand that. North Korea needs to understand that.
Well, thank you. That's the key point, I suppose. So we now have the floor is open for questions. Could you please identify yourself and your your status, and regular members will come first, please. Thank you.
Martin Kölling with the German financial daily Handelsblatt. Thank you very much for your insights. I have a question regarding the goals of North Korea. Listening to you, it seems that the goal is their own security. I talked to some analysts who think that the goal is not only their own security, but also that the nuclear weapons are an instrument, a tool to drive a wedge between South Korea and the United States, drive the United States out of South Korea, and unify the peninsula under North Korean leadership. So, if this is the overarching goal of North Korea, how can you negotiate with them about restraints in the development of their nuclear program and their missiles?
I think the only possible way would be you may not be able to survive with your nuclear weapon. As you say, North Korea may give any additional reason why they would like to pursue nuclear weapon, but yet we need to demonstrate to them, I'm sorry that you cannot survive with nuclear weapon. In order to demonstrate that, as I said, we need to impose on them the most strict economic sanctions, including oil embargoes, including cutting off the any sort of fund transfer, in particular through a very informal channel. We have not done it. And at the same time, we need to convince China that the nuclear North Korea would be detrimental to the national interest of China. At the same time, we need to tell to China, we do not wish to see the collapse of North Korea. We shall provide sufficient assurance and sufficient means for North Korea to survive without nuclear weapon. That's the reason why I say that Tillerson's 4 No's may serve the basis for the discussion with Chinese. And also the September of 2005 agreement of 6-party talk, they signed up. The North Korea, his 6 parties signed up. Therefore, what is missing from there is the verification process of the denuclearization, and at the same time, the assurance to them. North Korea doesn't believe in the true intent on the part of the United States or Japan or Korea. We need to make sure that they believe. But before doing it, as I said, all the strict economic sanction measures, we have not done it. We have not done it. We must make sure that first we convince Chinese, then we make sure that the United Nations will provide the most strict economic sanctions, including oil embargoes.
Thank you.
Fred Varco, freelance. 7 years ago, North Korea bombarded Yongpyong Island in South Korea, and they, I think, delivered 107 missiles. And although it wasn't overly reported at the time, South Korea responded by targeting military bases in North Korea with 80 missiles. And from my information that I've got, the North Koreans at the time were terrified that the US was going to get involved at that time. So my question is, do you think that a limited military strike against North Korea might actually have a beneficial effect and might actually bring North Korea to its senses?
I don't know, to be very honest. As I said, any military action on both sides and escalation of military confrontation we would like to avoid. we like to avoid. And we cannot assure that a limited U.S. military attack will not invite any retaliation from North Korea. We're not entirely sure how effective the limited military attack will be on the part of the United States. What I am saying is there may be a necessity for that, end of the day, to show how serious we are. But yet, even before we do so, there is a variety of things we need to be doing. As I said, we need to have a very, very sort of intensive discussion, negotiation among 4 nations, United States, China, Korea, and Japan, because I think there is a common ground for that. And we must convince Chinese the strongest economic pressure, inclusive of the oil embargo, would serve to lead North Korea for the negotiation for denuclearization. I'm sure there is going to be various evolution from there, but it's much too early to talk about the effects of the military measures. Nobody thinks, I don't know, United States may be thinking about it, but if I were in the government, I would like to stop it, because we have not exhausted our means for the diplomatic settlement.
The word sometimes used as surgical strike, is that what you're thinking of? Thank you.
Tim Kelly from Reuters. You talked about sanctions as a way to bring the North Koreans to negotiations. Are there also any concessions that the US or Japan or other countries should make in order to entice Pyongyang to talk?
There has been history of this type of negotiation with North Korea. Even recent, I think the U.S. Second track discussion has been taking place. I'm not entirely sure if it is taking place today, but yeah, there has been some. And we've been sort of, again, I do not know the accuracy of this, but yet people talked about in exchange of nuclear missile testing freeze, the United States and Korea stop the joint military operations, but US and also South Korea does not agree to it. They may have told the possibility of nuclear test freeze or missile launch freeze in exchange of the immediate peace treaty or whatever. What is needed is the initiation of negotiation. What is needed is the freeze of nuclear testing, nor the missile launch. Because having dealt North Korea, you must know that only when you make a deep negotiation and find the exit, you rest assured for the resolution. You should not make a deal, half-boiled deal, just for the sake of test freeze, because they cheat us, no question. They, as some of you talked about, they have a very clear idea about developing their nuclear capability. Therefore, I agree that it must be very, very difficult to persuade them to get rid of nuclear weapons. But yet, I think, given the fact that we are going to be threatened in a very deep way with North Korean nuclear weapon, we must stop them to do it. Therefore, what we need to be doing is to, at least we need to be establishing unity among 4 countries. And 2, someone needs to be discussing with North Koreans informally. I mean, I don't think there is a usage of open 6-party talks for this type of thing. There would have to be someone underground, discussing various possibilities. When I negotiated with North Korea, at the outset we said, anything we discuss, anything we develop, this will not bind our government. Let's find out a sort of mutually acceptable way of resolving various issues. So in order, without this type of exploratory type negotiations, informal negotiations, I don't think we can provide any answer to this complex issue which involves life and death of a nation. So I don't know, the 4-country unity, and someone needs to be discussing the question with North Korea deep and try to bring it to the open format of 6-party talks for that. But it is going to be a lengthy process.
You mean find another Mr. X? Is that?
No. Find anyone.
Anyone? Thank you.
Anthony Rowley, Singapore Business Times. Where does the main danger lie, in your view? I mean, the possibility of an attempt by the US to conduct a preemptive strike, a surgical strike, if you like, or an accident in which perhaps the South Korean military gets involved with the North Korean military. Where is, if there is to be a flare-up, a confrontation, where is it most likely, do you think, to occur? And secondly, Seiji Maehara, the former foreign minister, was here last week, and he said, for all I know, secret negotiations may be going on at this particular moment. But what are the logistics of that? I mean, is there a hotline between Tokyo? Is there a hotline between Washington and Pyongyang? If one of the great powers, Japan, US, whatever, wanted to get involved in a negotiation behind the scenes, how feasible is that? I mean, is it easy to set up, do you think, logistically?
Yeah. Yeah, the first question, what is the likelihood, what type of military confrontation would be likely? Don't misunderstand me. I am talking about the possibility of military confrontation as undesirable development. Therefore, we have to stop it by all means. Therefore, there may not be eventual likelihood of any military confrontation. But if there were, it would be something like first very limited type of the exchange. I don't know, but yet we need to have this context. With this context, there is all the time risk of escalation. Therefore, even when it is limited, there is a huge impact. So we should not, the point I'm making, let us be aware of the possibility of military confrontation because of the reason I said A, B, C, D. But yet, with that, let us make sure to find out the way we can settle this by diplomatic means. Mr. Maehara, as the opposition leader, not entirely sure if he can reveal anything like yes, there is going to be, there has been any secret negotiation going to take place here in this type of meeting. I don't know, simply I don't know, but I am very, very hopeful that it's okay if United States does it, or Japan does it, or Korea does it. There must be some sort of route which can, end of the day, become effective. The type of formal setups, like hotline or face-to-face official negotiation, may not be the right thing at this juncture, because we need to be thinking about domestic audience, we need to thinking about various stakeholders and also thing. If you look back the history of U.S.-Korea, U.S.-North Korea negotiation, sometimes all of a sudden we see Henry Kissinger playing an important role. And, a couple of times it can be former government officials, it can be public intellectuals, it can be university professors type thing, and gradually try to come up with common elements for starting up formal or informal negotiation by the government. Therefore, I don't think we have at this stage sort of established official channel. But mind you, I have no contact whatsoever with the Japanese Foreign Ministry today. So anything I say doesn't have any hard evidence. I'm sorry for that.
Yes.
Ichiro Tokumoto, freelance. My question is about the functioning of the Japanese government. I think you said you left the government 12 years ago. And my question is about the difference between now and then is Japanese government has a National Security Council, NSC. And when you are dealing with North Korea in 1990s, we didn't have that. So if you had the NSC when you are dealing with North Korea, do you think you had more effective and efficient negotiation with North Korea? And from your experience, what's the difference do you think the NSC made on the Japanese diplomacy since the second Abe government was established? And the second question is, I think that recently British Prime Minister Theresa May was invited to the meeting of a Japanese NSC. It is standard practice? As far as I know, I don't think that the Japanese Prime Minister Abe will be invited to the NSC meeting of Trump White House. So, from your experience, do you think that this is a standard practice in the community of a diplomat?
You must pose this question to the government official who has an experience in dealing with foreign affairs without NSC and with NSC. So I left the government 12 years ago. And in my time, it was more to do with the very sort of straightforward, the foreign ministry to the Prime Minister's office, the very constant consultation. Now the NSC is, I think, in a democratic nation, should be much more legitimate in dealing with national security issues, and it should be much more effective in dealing with national security issues. Therefore, I'm not entirely sure how in the real world it operates. Therefore, I cannot make a straightforward comparison, but yet I think NSC is an important body for deciding upon various issues which leads to the Japanese national security issues. That's the answer to. I'm getting old. I forgot your second question. What is? British Prime Minister. I am not entirely sure if it is a standard practice, but yet, if I'm not mistaken, am I revealing the state secret? Probably not. When I was with the Japanese Prime Minister Koizumi to the United States, I think there was a very similar sort of practice. I cannot say exactly what was like, but yet I think Japan was invited, the Japanese Prime Minister was indeed invited to be a part of the process of the national security consultation in the US government. Therefore, I think, I mean, with British Prime Minister in NSC, I do not believe that they are free to talk anything which may have an impact on our relationship with Britain or with Europe. No, it is just the sort of the demonstration of kind of friendship or anything. It's a good gesture. Why don't you take it that way?
Thank you. Do we have any more questions from? Sorry.
Hello, my name's Daniel Hurst. I'm a freelance journalist. Thanks for your talk. Given how far North Korea has come along this nuclear and missile development, is it actually realistic to expect complete abandonment of the program to be on the table? I guess I just wanted to press you a bit more on the idea of a freeze of the program as opposed to complete abandonment. So how realistic is it to get them to step right back from the program entirely? And secondly, on sanctions, you mentioned an oil embargo. How could that be done in a way that doesn't gravely impact the people of North Korea? Thank you.
I have seen the process all the way from the very beginning. As I said, I am the first Japanese who heard from the United States intelligence briefing on the nuclear program of North Korea in 1989. And since then, I have taken part in various activities to stop North Korea to further develop nuclear program. The 1994 KEDO, the framework agreement, was more to do with carrot side. We promised them to provide the 2 nuclear facilities in exchange of the verifiable stoppage of the plutonium project. And all the way through, we more or less used a carrot approach. The 2002, when Prime Minister went to Japanese Prime Minister went to North Korea, the fact that Japanese Prime Minister make a trip to North Korea is a concession. And we did not promise cash, but yet we promised future sort of economic cooperation. Because in order for us to settle the past, we needed to provide North Korea certain financial resources, as we did with South Korea in 1965. So, in 2005 September, it was a carrot approach as well, because we provided them the prospect that North Korea can have this and that in exchange of verifiable nuclear dismantlement. It was 2006 September they launched initial nuclear testing. Since then we used basically sort of stick approach, the sanctions. What I am saying now is there are a couple of things we have not done yet in terms of stick. Stick is not meant for, trying to collapse North Korea. Stick demonstrate that we can provide anything you want, not anything, but yet reasonable thing you want. But yet, in order for North Korea to make a choice, I think we need to impose on them severest sanction, which we have not done. The past sanctions, economic sanctions. I mean, indeed, China had been sort of helping North Korea under the sanction regime. So it wasn't effective. So the point I am making is, why don't we make that sanction work much more effective way so that they can make choices? Do we believe that North Korea will collapse out of economic sanctions, inclusive of oil embargo? Probably not. But China may start thinking that indeed, for the sake of Chinese international reputation, whatever, China needs to come forward for us and try to make economic sanctions effective. Then we need to think about various things. So what I am talking about is simply that let us make sanctions workable and wait and see what is the responses on the part of North Korea. But again, we need to convince China and Russia as well that indeed we are doing this for the sake of meaningful negotiation. After all, we are not doing it for the sake of letting North Korean government collapse. That's the reason why I say foreknowledge by Tillerson, State Secretary, may be, a good ground for the future negotiation.
Any more? Yes.
But is anyone really getting to the root of the problem? I mean, what does North Korea want? They want a peace treaty, presumably. They don't want an armistice. So, at the expense of sounding naive, why doesn't the US simply sign a peace treaty? And also, is anyone really trying to talk to them? I've often mentioned the fact that Putin, when he came here in 2000, had just come from Pyongyang, and he said no one was actually talking to the North Koreans. So I picked up the phone and called Kim Jong-il and said, can I come and talk to you? And Kim Jong-il said, yes, come next week. So he went and he talked, and after that things began to open up. So two questions. One, are we really getting to the heart of the problem? And is anyone really trying to talk to Kim Jong-un?
Oh, Kim Jong-un, the new one.
I said Kim Jong-un.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a possibility of making a ground bargain, meaning that, as you say, peace treaty versus verifiable nuclear dismantlement. It's not the freeze of nuclear testing and peace treaty. Nuclear verifiable nuclear dismantlement and denuclearization. That may be worth trying, because the peace treaty does recognize the status quo. Peace treaty does indeed recognize North Korea as a full-fledged state on the Korean Peninsula, and I think that will lead to normalization process. The question of with whom you talk to, I am not entirely sure this. Either way, in my time, when I was negotiating with North Korea, there was a kind of establishment there. It's the National Defense Council. National Defense Council under military first system is the supreme decision-making body. The Kim Jong-il is the chairman of it. Therefore, they have got the very sort of structured interagency meeting and all that. It's like normal nation. They have got decision-making process. Therefore, each time when I negotiated with my interlocutor, they went back to North Korea and got the clearance from defense council type thing. It was as if I were negotiating with the United States, much more structured decision-making process in North Korea. Not entirely sure today if there is that type of structured decision-making process exists in North Korea. That adds difficulty we have. Would it be Kim Jong-un, one-man decision-making process? There is no precise structure for decision-making process. If that were the case, it's going to be very, very dangerous, because, you know, someone talked about National Security Council. National Security Council is up for various assessment, plus and minuses. If Japan takes this and that, we need to make right assessment about pros and cons and all sorts of things. If the North Korean decision-making process was something like Kim Jong-un one-man state type decision-making process, that is going to be very, very dangerous. That will probably add the possibility of the military confrontation. But yet again, we must try. We must find out right sort of interlocutor and start negotiating, start sort of communicating. And again, as I said, since I'm not in the government, I don't know. That may be taking place. And if that was the case, I would be very, very happy. So, but yet I have the feeling that someone needs to initiate. This is not officialdom. This is not official act, but yet I think things are so precarious, so vulnerable. Let us find any means to reach to them and to convince them that you are doing something very, very dangerous. If you are to develop your ICBMs, you may be hit.
Martin Kölling, Handelsblatt again. One question then, of course, is that as always on the table when talking about negotiations with North Korea, can they be trusted? So how do you make sure, can they be trusted? What is your experience from your own negotiations? Because also in business negotiations, you hear that they also took basically economic aid from Russia, but didn't pay back or whatever. So they even cheated their friends. So how are we sure that we can trust North Korea?
That's the reason why I took one whole year. It took 25 times of 10 hours negotiation, because each process is a process of credibility check. Credibility check meaning, do we trust him, type thing. Therefore, it's not, I did not trust him in words. I wanted to check his credibility by asking him to do something. And if he did something which belonged to very much to do with the national security decision, then I trust. Therefore, I had asked a couple of things, like when I visited North Korea, can you make an arrangement for the meeting with me for the North Korean Prime Minister or Foreign Minister? Although I didn't demand to meet with Kim Jong-il, but I wanted to test his credibility, and I wanted to test him, because again, this is a process of negotiation, and he needs to sort of test my credibility, and I needed to test his credibility. So, can you arrange a meeting with someone? And initially, I demanded him to release the Japanese, a kind of Japanese national, who is former Nikkei journalist who were arrested by North Korea as espionage. And I demanded him to release this man without any condition whatsoever. He did it. And when there was the exchange of fires in the control zone of the sea between South and North, I demanded them to make an apology, official apology to South Korea. So at least I felt that I can trust the interlocutor. They wanted to try to check my credibility as well. That's the reason why I went to Prime Minister's office very often, so that the Japanese press can write about Sori no Ichinichi, day of the Prime Minister meeting with Director General for Asia Pacific region, meeting 88 times in 1 year, which does add my credibility. And I went to the United States often, meeting with the Richard Armitage, Deputy Secretary of State type thing, and North Koreans look at this. Yes, Mr. Tanaka has a strong connection with the United States as well. North Korea is scared to death of the United States. So there are ways to test their credibility, but end of the day, I may be naive. I am a naive person. Maybe naive. I think there is a kind of trust developed by negotiation, meaning that you should not make any lie. You should not exaggerate things. You should be straightforward. In demanding things, you should make a straightforward statement. You cannot do this and that type thing. By repeating it, you can develop sense of trust in each other. I think diplomacy is to do with trust. If you don't trust your interlocutor, then diplomacy doesn't yield a result. It's not only to do with North Koreans, to do with South Koreans, Chinese, Americans, and all sorts of things. That is the very, very important element of diplomacy. You must maintain your integrity. Don't cheat, don't lie. That's the source of your credibility. That's, I think, still feel important. So often you find someone who states something there and different thing there. You won't be believed. You won't be trusted. So, I mean, I was, by the way, I was kind of criticized by various people when Prime Minister trip completed. I did not make any apologetic statement. I wanted to maintain my integrity so that I could negotiate with North Korea in the future as well. I mean, for some time we need to do something. If, I were to make all the type of excuses in response to various criticism, domestic criticism, huge bashing on me, but yet I wanted to maintain my integrity. So I did not make any excuses. That's important.
My name is Kurt Sieber. I'm an associate member. Thank you very much for your explanations today. I have one question in connection with the Koizumi Times. You mentioned that Japan promised some economic collaboration with North Korea, and Mr. Koizumi came back with 5 of the abductees at that time. What kind of economic collaboration did Japan offer to North Korea after the return of these 5 abductees? Thank you.
We did not give anything to them. They clearly wanted to have cash. We refused to provide any cash or economic cooperation. What we promised is a prospect for the economic cooperation in the event we conclude the normalization with North Korea. In order to normalize our relationship with North Korea, we need to go to the Japanese Diet for approval. I explained everything to North Koreans. We need to get an approval of Japanese Diet. In order to get an approval from Japanese Diet, do you think that we can leave the question of abductees unresolved? Therefore, in order for us to be able to normalize relationship with North Korea and get an approval from the Japanese Diet for economic cooperation, we must be resolving the question of abductees, we must be resolving the question of nuclear weapon, question of the missiles. That's written in the document we agreed upon with North Korea. So you may feel it's very strange, a country like North Korea, without getting hard cash, why they conceded to Japan to return those 5 abductees to. But I say this is a whole package, comprehensive. We talked about future, we talked about bigger picture. That's what is needed, even when we talk about this nuclear question, not the kind of piecemeal agreement. What is needed is very comprehensive agreement. In that comprehensive agreement, the question of Japanese-North Korean normalization is needed to be included. The question of abduction needs to be there as well. That's the reason why we talk. Koizumi talked. A comprehensive resolution is the only way for the question of North Korea, and I'm sure as an eventuality, if we were seeing any diplomatic solution, that diplomatic solution would be very comprehensive.
Any more questions?
Fred Varco, freelance. You hinted already about China that they undermine 6-party talks. Do you think we can basically rely on Chinese sincerity or not?
This is going to be an evolution. This is going to be an evolution because China in the past, China in the future, China today, I think China themselves are evolving. One may say that, look at this, the bank, AIIB. China originally wanted to establish Chinese bank, but after all those countries in Europe, Australia, Korea, that became international indeed. Therefore, that has become more transparent than Chinese originally thought. So China, as they are getting bigger, they are getting more stronger stake in international stability. Therefore, Chinese future, what China make decisions regarding North Korea is very much depend upon us and the United States as well. I mean, I don't sort of trust China to do something the United States tell them to do, but yet I think that's the reason why I say let us sit down and talk about in a very candid way the interest we have. And I don't think China has interest in maintaining current status quo, knowing North Korea is such a entity, such a impossible entity. Therefore, only when we have, develop a sort of trust in each other. It's difficult, but yet I think it's worth trying. And China, end of the day, may understand the way they should go.
You may not be able to answer this question, but how many concealed nuclear weapons do you think North Korea has which can't be seen from satellites, for instance? I mean, if you're talking about preemptive strike, you can take out those you can see, but how many concealed weapons do you think?
No, I am not a scientist, and I'm not. I think I'm not in a position to make any speculation about how many nuclear warheads they have, or is their ballistic missile reachable to San Francisco or anything. There are so many unknowns in relation to North Korea. But one thing is quite clear in my mind. They are making all type of public statement. They are showing various scenes of launching missiles and all sort of things. The other day they were showing the nuclear warhead type thing. Do we believe in it? But I am saying that there is. All the time North Korea is fabricating things, and it may be true, but it may not. So simply, I don't know. We should not, make any definitive assumption about the stage of development on the part of on the question of nuclear weapon in North Korea. But at least one thing I can say. That is, time is very, very limited. I think we have probably 1 year or 2 for us to be able to settle this question. I assume that North Korean nuclear development is still in making. Therefore, let us find the right solution, diplomatic solution, before they complete their nuclear program. When they complete nuclear program, it would become much more difficult for us to find a nuclear settlement. We need to convince China that this is the case. This is the case. So this 1 year, 2 year would be very, very important for Japan as well.
Am I allowed to have a question first? I have here the text of the Pyongyang Declaration of 2002, which promises normalization of relations between Japan and North Korea, and it doesn't say anything about solving the abduction problem. I think it was assumed then that the abduction problem had already been solved. First of all, did you write that declaration?
Yes.
You did. Well, why does at the time you were still seeking more resolution of an abducting question, or was that something which was raised by the now Prime Minister Abe in order to derail the move towards normalization?
I don't think Prime Minister of today derailed the normalization negotiation. Yes, indeed, there was no mention about the abduction, but yet if you read it very carefully, there is a phrase in which we discussed about a kind of way we handle things, the friendly sort of consultation between Japan and North Korea. And I made a judgment that North Korean argument is that please don't try to write the question of abduction, because this is the much more sort of long-range arrangement for Japan and North Korea, and they promised to solve the question. And again, Kim Jong-il made a statement with Koizumi that we apologize for the abductees question, and we send back those survived, and we make thorough investigation into those missing. And we made judgment by getting the Kim Jong-il's statement there would be the better way for us to pursue the question. That's the reason why immediately after the return of the Japanese Prime Minister, we demanded the return of those 5 people, and we also demanded them to make thorough investigation. That's the reason why we sent a delegation to North Korea with all the materials and demanded various verifications, various evidences for a deaths of certain people. But it did not address all the questions we had at that time. That was a continuing process. Indeed, North Korea said this was all resolved, but yet, I mean, bad thing about we in the democratic nation try to believe something when it is convenient to believe. But I don't believe in the statement made by those PT officials of the North Korean government.
But, yeah. Oh, sorry.
Takashi Kui, I'm freelance. I covered the Gulf War from Derail, Saudi Arabia, and I was there for 8 months. Now, the foreign journalist at that time stayed at a hotel next to the Derail Air Base, Saudi Air Base. There were about 300 of us, and every evening, every night, around 1 a.m., the sirens would go on, and the U.S. forces would tell us that the Iraqis were about to fire their Scuds towards us, and so we put on our gas masks and went downstairs to the basement to avoid, of course, the Scud missile. And every evening, the U.S. forces would say, missile destroyed, every evening, around 2 a.m. And after that, we went back to our rooms. But 10 years after this experience, when I got back to Tokyo, I read a news article saying that most of the Patriot missiles did not work. They did not destroy the Scud missiles. Are you sure that this time Tokyo is safe?
Again, that's asking a question which, to someone who doesn't know much knowledge about the accuracy of the Japanese anti-missile defense system, the government will say, "Don't worry," and I say, "Don't worry." But those who have knowledge about all those anti-ballistic missiles, you cannot shoot down everything, that is for sure. So how much you can shoot, that depends upon the situation. So as a person who has probably less knowledge than you, cannot make any other comments. You cannot shoot down everything, but yet the government, we have to say that we are doing our best to protect the lives of the Japanese people. I will echo that statement.
Good. We're getting close to the time limit, but I think we can take one more question. Yes.
Thank you very much again, Martin Kölling. One question, your last question, maybe the easiest one. You're looking back on a very long career in a diplomatic service. If you look at the current situation, how serious it is compared to other situations. Were we ever so close to a war before in Northeast Asia, East Asia?
I think that is more serious than ever before. There was a very serious situation in 1994. At that time, I was director in charge of the contingency planning in the Japanese Foreign Ministry. We prepared for possible outbreak of hostilities on the Korean Peninsula. It was a very, very nightmarish preparation. We expected to have U.S. military, airplanes, massive military airplanes stationed in Japan, and we expected a huge refugee coming to Japan. And we had to make a plan for evacuation of Japanese nationals from Korean Peninsula and all sorts of things. It is impossible task at that time, 94. Now, that was 94. That was a very early stage of North Korean nuclear development. I have a regret, deep regret, that we were not able to stop North Korean nuclear development. I'm sorry for that, as a person who took part in various diplomacy vis-a-vis North Korea all the way. But now, North Korea is equipped with more dangerous weapons. I'm not entirely sure how usable their nuclear staff is, but yet clearly you can say that North Korea is more dangerous entity than 1994. And again, given the statement made by the unique leader in North Korea and also leader in the United States, there may be much more likelihood of possible military confrontation. Yes, I regret that we both Japan, United States, and my colleagues in the United States, we were not able to stop them. I'm sorry for that. But yet, I think we need to stop them. Their further development of nuclear weapon. We need to stop possible military action. So this may sound very impossible task, but yet we need to try. That's the reason why I say we need to do something we have not done before. That is the much severe economic sanction, inclusive of the oil embargo, and much sort of much more positive attitude on the part of China to contain North Korea.
Well, thank you very much. The 1994 crisis was solved by sending former President Carter, right? So maybe we have to find somebody of equal importance to send. Thank you very, very much for your. I don't think we realize fully just how much valuable information has been given to us today. It will take some time for me, at least, to digest it all. But thank you very much, and I'd like to show our appreciation by inviting you to the annual membership of our club. I know he's already a member of the Archives Club, but this place is even better.